This is Sadi Phayet, and this video is called The Blessing of Home Life. Welcome to my channel. I saw a post that someone put up earlier today, and on it a young man was talking about what cheating was really about as it relates to men who cheat. And he was saying that it had more to do with a man's or a young man's self-esteem or lack of self-esteem, lack of feeling successful in life. Basically, that he was living off of the bravado of his sexual organs and sexual mastery. And it just got me to thinking about, a lot of times we in the black community vilify our brothers when they are promiscuous because, no one wants to be cheated on, or no one wants to know that someone who they love and who loves them is intimately involved with someone else. I mean, I'm sure the men or the young men would also not like that behavior done to them. Everybody values loyalty and being able to be secure in a relationship. So it doesn't feel good for anyone to get cheated on. But I think he was speaking to men because he is a male, and he even said in the video that women cheat also. And so it just got me to thinking about family life and home life, because sometimes in today's society, everybody wants to be famous, or they want to be out and be seen as being great or have some kind of notoriety. And as a result of that, even if it's just that you want to be really successful in a career path, because you got a great education, whatever the reason, it kind of neglects the family, so that you have women that don't really cook from scratch. They might heat things up or buy things that are already cooked, or you have men that don't have a lot of interest in the home except for as a flop house. It's just a place to come and sleep at the end of the day, and maybe have a little bit more sex than you already had, but with the woman you're committed to. And all of that is just, it's immature behavior, but it's also toxic behavior. Excuse me. And it takes us back really into the slave system. And I know, I don't want to harp on slavery so much, but I do know that as black people in America particularly, and maybe even in the Caribbean, we still feel the effects and are living the effects of some of the behaviors we were forced into during that time period. And because families tend to replicate cycles of behavior, we'll find, oh, my daddy was a hoe, and so I'm hoeing, and I hope I hoe till I die. Or like in my case, my father did have outside relationships that hurt some of my siblings when they found a couple of letters from one of his mistresses, and then him and my mother almost broke up, and everybody was so distraught. And I think that was probably the moment that I was like, well, I'm not getting married, and I think I've talked about that on my Facebook page, because I just don't want, I never wanted the messiness that comes from having to rely on someone who may not be as disciplined as you are, or may not be as committed as you are. So I wanted to do a video not vilifying men. I really want us to dialogue and start talking about healing, because that's really what it's about. Some of us have childhood sexual abuse issues to get over. Some of us have repeated cycles to get over because we watched whatever our same gender parent we're doing in our lifetime. And so, or in my case, as a woman, and, who comes from a family where there was that kind of activity, and which probably caused the eventual breakup of my parents. I just didn't want the headache. I didn't want to have that vulnerable type of existence as a woman. So, yeah, that's what I want to talk about tonight. Anywho, let's get into it. I named this The Blessing of Home Life because I'm the type of person, even though I said I never wanted to be married, I love home life. Like, I always wanted to have children. Of course, I would love to have a happy marriage per se, or really a relationship that involves home life. But, and that's only because I love the things of home. Like, I love to sew, I love to crochet, I love to cook, I love to clean, I love to take care of my children, things like that, which is why when I set up my videos, it's always like a cozy little spot. So this time I added Jock, my daughter's little stuffed puppy, to the picture, and another one of my crocheted blankets, because I just think that looks warm and cozy. So, and that's what I love. Call me corny, I don't care. Somebody has to take care of family. For the rest of you knuckleheads that are out there, having a good time until you're 99. So, one of the things I do want to remind us of as I start this talk is that there are effects for everything that we choose to do. And sometimes those effects can trickle down to our children, can trickle down to our old age. And one of the things I've seen and learned is that when a man spends most of his time being promiscuous, even until, old age or almost old age, because at a certain point, you might find yourself unable to be promiscuous. Invariably, he's hurt the people closest to him. And that can have the effect of him then being neglected, and his family not spending the time with him that he would like in his old age, as a result of maybe him abandoning them when he was younger and more virile. They're now, children and people tend to turn that hurt back around, even if it's in a passive aggressive way. And so we just really have to try and be mindful that we're improving on the generation before us. My father in particular grew up as the third child of a single mother. His father was a musician who sang and played some kind of horned instrument. He worked the Chitlin circuit of the South. And so he did get to work with Ella Fitzgerald, but he worked with various artists, either singing or playing instruments. And he very rarely saw my grandmother and my uncles and my aunt and my father. And so they grew up in that single family household that's become so common now. And I think as a result, though, they all, maybe my grandmother enforced that they be family men, but they all became family men. My father was a star athlete in high school and college, and then his other influence was that he joined the Marines. He was the only one in his family to seek a college education. So aside from his mother's discipline, because she was a very disciplined, a masterful woman in the home, and she worked outside of the home, I think that still made an impression on her children, because they all became very hardworking people and had, really beautiful homes and families. And so as a result of that, my father always worked a job, sometimes two jobs, because he would teach at Olive Harvey College on the weekends, and so that my mother could stay at home with us while we were all little, because they had a bunch of us. And so when we were very small, And until I think the youngest one went to school, she was home with us. And as the older ones got older, she, of course, would work part-time because they both had college degrees. My father completed his master's, and my mother um, had only completed 1 year of her master's when they had their first child. So one of the things that my father did, which was probably one of the greatest things that he did, was when he taught at Olive Harvey College, and it was probably not just him, but some of my godfathers too, they would encourage the young men in their classes and on the basketball team that my father coached to marry the women they had children with. And because, of course, like I said, from slavery, we have these behaviors, one of which was that we were not allowed to stay with our families. A lot of times children were sold away from their mothers. Men and women, even if they had a slave wedding, they were separated for various reasons. And men were usually farmed out for the purpose of producing large amounts of children. And that way, slave masters didn't have to pay for new slaves because they had children, slaves being born on their plantations that would, be more free labor. And so to keep costs down, I mean, this was an economy, this was an economic venture. So they're still looking at, demand, they're still looking at overhead, all of that. And we were a part of that system of economics. And so our black man's sperm was a main contributor to that economic system. And so, we find ourselves today caught in the same paradigm of destruction when it comes to our relationships in our community, far more than other people in other races and in other cultures. And it just gives us this burden of instability that we have to overcome, that sometimes we are not aware that we need to heal from that and overcome, so that we can actually be a hero to our children and a hero to the women that bore them, and so that we ourselves can have not we ourselves, I'm not a man, but so our men themselves can have the gift of emotional stability, of being dependable, the pride of being able to be depended upon. I mean, that's such a good feeling to know that when someone needs you, you're actually there for them. It's stressful. It causes so much negativity when you drop the ball and someone needs you. You know what I mean? And it's not something you can go back from. People don't last forever. So if you keep letting people down in your life because you're not, into family life, or you're not into relationships with other people or for other people, or in a way where you're attached to them for whatever reason, whether it's just because you're addicted to sex, or whether you just like running the street. And some of our women are the same way. We love to be out and about, whether it's in the clubs or going out with our friends or whatever. We'll drop our kids off with anybody, or we'll drop them off with our mothers who are too old to want to raise somebody else's children. It's not just the men, it's women too. And the family suffers because of that. In most of our movements, we've been taught that our first community building thrust begins in the home. Because if you can't work as a unified front with a spouse and with the children that you produce with that person, if you're not working to improve yourselves, to make sure your children are growing up with the vision you have for them, then how are you then going to go out into the community and be effective on building a great community? Take, for instance, if you're a woman okay, and you're a single mother and you have children, but you like to fuck around a lot. At the point that you say, I want to be a part of building our community back up again, well, who are you going to find in the community but a whole slew of ex-lovers? And then who are your children going to find out there? And what are they going to be saying about about your mother? You know what I mean? It's just, it's too much. It's too much. We have to grow up. Maturity is a big part of it. So anyway, my father met my mother when he went to college in her hometown of Topeka, Kansas. Now, my mother's family was active in most of the equal rights movements that black people were involved in, like since slavery. And as a matter of fact, they came to Kansas from whatever southern state, I think it was either Kentucky or Tennessee, where they were held as slaves. There was a movement called the Exodusters, and I can't remember the man's name who was the leader of it, but they were a part of that group of just released ex-slaves, and they traveled across the country, coming from different parts of the South and settling in different parts of more northern states, even though Kansas is not the most northern state, to have new lives, to have stable homes. Some of the ex-slaves came with money. Some were offsprings of slave masters who may have provided them with some funds, may have made sure that they were skilled, had some type of skill that they could earn money to come. So there was already a class system being set up among that group of black people that came to Kansas. And my mother's family was among the group of people that came with some money, purchased land, purchased property. So whereas my father, even though his mother did come from that kind of paradigm of having a grandfather who was a slave master, who had, and a grandmother, or mother rather, who had land in the state where she was held as slave, or where her family was held as slaves. When they came to Chicago, which was another part of that great exodus out of the South, most of the people, and my grandmother included, lived in housing projects. And so my father grew up in a single family home in a housing project, very stereotypical of what our people went through during that time. And even though my grandmother was very hardworking, she was not educated. My mother's parents were both educated. They were school teachers. Her father also did some manual labor, even though he had a heart condition. They lived in the home that my grandmother was raised in, and they lived with my grandmother's mother. And so, they were both in higher education together, and so that kind of evened out the playing field as far as their goals were concerned. And so they, once they went into that environment at that time, it was the civil rights movement. They were active in that. So what they brought to the realm of having a family was a lot of discipline, a lot of culture, a lot of activism. And that's what I've also incorporated in my life. Although I don't have a husband to share that with as my mother did. And so, but I really, I push that with my children. It's important to me. It's important for my children to come outside of the home and take part in cultural activities and political activities, to give back, to be a part of standing up for injustice. All the things that I was raised in, I pass on to my children. So I'm saying to us, in lieu of this video that I saw of this young man talking about cheating and what causes people to cheat, I'm just imploring that we will look at the life that we're living and maybe decide that we can do better. and that if we want to do better, maybe trace the path that has caused us to have this behavior. If we're just repeating cycles, if we're just doing what all the men or all the women did around us as we were growing up, or when we became young adults and started socializing and dating, and see if that serves your greater purpose today. I hope I didn't offend anybody. I really tried to be balanced with what I have to say, but I really love us, and I want the best for us. I want the best for myself because I know I have true love that I have yet to experience in my life. Not really true love. I've had some relationships that didn't work out for a variety of reasons, but I'm 52, but I'm not done. And so I would love to be able to be in a relationship with a partner that we can be committed to each other and honor each other and not disrespect each other, because it would hurt a man just as much as it hurts us to find out that the woman he truly loves cheats on him on a regular basis. It's not, women are not monogamous just because our nature says we should be monogamous. Some women really just choose to be monogamous. But imagine as a man if that happened to you. If you said, I love this woman so much, I want to be faithful only to her, and she said the same thing, but she did something else. Okay? That's what you're faced with. How would you feel if you were in the shoes of the other person? If you're the cheater, but you were in the shoes of the other person where they were then the cheater, would you be happy? Would you want to stay with that person? Would that make you be committed to family? Or would you be bitter, unhappy, maybe stick with it so the children have two parents? I mean, come on. Let's build some real, stable families. That's all I want to say in this message. And I hope that what I've shared is positive and that you all like it. Peace.